So Michaela, whenever you're ready, we can make a start.
All right, well, I think that it's 1 minute past now, so I will take the floor. So hello and welcome everyone to today's event. It's great to see you all here on International Women's Day to celebrate with us here at PNND. And in light of this special occasion, I think it's important to mention that the UN decided that the theme for International Women's Day this year will be Women in Leadership, achieving an equal future in a COVID-19 world. This theme celebrates the tremendous efforts by women and girls around the world in shaping a more equal future and recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. In its own way, this event is also celebrating women in leadership. The theme for this event will be intergenerational dialogue between women involved in nuclear disarmament. There will be women leaders who have been in the nuclear disarmament field for a long time, as well as women leaders from younger generations, explaining their experiences and perspectives through intergenerational dialogue in their respective areas of expertise. Therefore, the event aims to highlight and promote the importance of intergenerational dialogue, namely between women in nuclear disarmament. Furthermore, this event aims to bring together the experiences, wisdom, and skills of different generations, as we believe it is invaluable as it unites a collective intelligence, thus generating shared meaning among generations that will aid in building more peaceful societies. Political dynamics are gendered, and the nuclear disarmament field is no exception. Women have been significant players in the nuclear disarmament arena, but it hasn't always been easy for them to participate. Even today, women still face glass ceilings, discrimination, and inequality. Furthermore, women and children are impacted disproportionately by armed conflict and nuclear detonations, but have the least say in the matter. Therefore, it is important that women discuss such issues in relation to nuclear disarmament through intergenerational dialogue to exchange and enrich their knowledge and understandings and unite to achieve their common goals together. So before we start, I would just like to name a few housekeeping rules. If we could all keep our microphones on mute while all the speakers are speaking, that would be great so we avoid some background noise. And also, we really urge you to use the Q&A box throughout the keynote speeches and also the mini panels, because afterwards, after each mini panel, we will be having a Q&A session. So please be sure to note them down when something pops into your head so we can have a fruitful discussion. So without further ado, I will introduce our keynote speaker, Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, the UN Undersecretary General and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, who will be participating via a pre-recorded video. We'll just take 2 seconds while we get it up on the share screen.
Sorry, we just lost it. I'll get it back. Okay, trying again.
There we go.
Distinguished panelists, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank parliamentarians for nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament, Youth Fusion, and the World Future Council for organizing this important event, which recognizes the critical but undervalued role women play in nuclear disarmament. I am particularly pleased to see that it takes an intersectional approach which allows us to fully understand the range of experiences women have in this field. Despite some recent promising developments, such as the entry into force of a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons and the extension of the New START treaty, current nuclear dangers remain a grave concern. Relationships between some nuclear weapon states continue their downward trajectory, weighed down by mistrust and the absence of transparency and meaningful dialogue. Nuclear modernization programs are underway in all nuclear armed states, contributing to what has been termed a qualitative nuclear arms race. Been exposed at the intersection between emerging technology, nuclear weapons, and potential new domains of conflict. Today's dialogue is, therefore, a reminder of the utmost importance of including women in nuclear disarmament, in activism, in policy and decision-making. It is essential if we are to take the much needed steps on the path towards our shared goal of a world free of nuclear weapons. As Secretary General Guterres has said, the meaningful inclusion of women in decision-making increases effectiveness and productivity, brings new perspectives and solutions to the table, unlocks greater resources, and strengthens efforts across our work. It is proven fact that the active involvement of women in peace processes produces better outcome for all involved. Let us use this opportunity today to pay due respect to the giants on whose shoulders we stand, while sharing the torch with a new generation of peace builders, the young women who will be the officials, diplomats, civil society activists, academics, and nuclear scientists, and of course, leaders of the future. We certainly owe much to our predecessors. Women have always led the charge against those diabolical weapons, from the members of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, one of the original campaigners for nuclear disarmament, to the mothers who protested the danger of nuclear testing, from Randell Forsberg, the leader of the Nuclear Freeze movement, to the many Hibakusha women who endured social stigma, yet bravely came forward with their testimonies. And more recently, to the Nobel Peace Prize winners, Alva Myrdal, and the leaders of ICAN. Yet despite the tireless efforts of many, women remain painfully underrepresented in United Nations disarmament processes, including as members of national delegations, let alone as heads of those delegations. The first committee of the General Assembly has had only a single female chair in 75 years. Still today, only 1/3 of the participants in these gatherings are likely to be women, and women typically deliver only 1/4 of the statements. This is unacceptable, not only because of the vital contribution women can make to the cause of nuclear disarmament, but also because it ignores the fact that any use of nuclear weapons would have an inherently gendered impact, biologically, economically, and socially. Recent studies have shown that women are biologically more vulnerable to harmful health effects of ionizing radiation than men, based on the experiences of the Hibakusha and nuclear test survivors. Women are also often the ones most affected by psychological health issues, displacement, social stigma, and discrimination. There are some glimmers of hope that the tide is turning. The TPNW, which entered into force on 22nd of January this year, explicitly recognizes both the gendered impacts of nuclear weapons and the need for equal, full, and effective participation of both men and women. But it also goes further, taking a gendered lens to the sensitive issue of assistance to the victims of the use and testing of nuclear weapons. Gender has also become an increasing focus during the current review cycle of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. In addition to the support of many states parties for recognition of gendered impacts and for equal participation, there is growing support among some for the need for a gender focus to examine all aspects of nuclear policy, both related to weapons and peaceful uses. I remain hopeful that the 10th NPT Review Conference, when it is held, will, at a minimum, have a robust dialogue on gender-related issues and include these issues in any final outcome. For our part, the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, UNODA, is working to mainstream gender and raise awareness. Our recently released strategic plan commits UNODA to strengthening the interlinkages between disarmament, arms control, and non-proliferation, and efforts to achieve gender equality and women's empowerment through a gender-responsive approach to peace and security. We work to ensure that bodies such as groups of governmental experts or fellowships have gender parity. And we seek to expand understanding about the importance of gender responsiveness through events such as this one, but also the webinar we will be holding early next month on integrating gender perspectives into the NPT review process. We're also working to expand our inclusivity efforts to other underrepresented groups as well, including by committing to improving the accessibility of disarmament fora for those with disabilities and promoting and protecting space for civil society. The Secretary General in his disarmament agenda has referred to youth as the ultimate force for change. In recognizing this, our new outreach initiative, #YouthForDisarmament, engages, educates, and empowers young people by offering resources like training programs such as the UN Youth Champions for Disarmament and a dedicated digital platform, youthfordisarmament.org. As part of the largest generation in history, today's young people hold tremendous power and responsibility, and a world free of nuclear weapons cannot be achieved without their participation. We have made progress, but there is still a long way to go for true gender equality and diversity in disarmament. My office will therefore continue to implement gender-responsive approaches and to create an inclusive environment where all voices are respected and heard. We all stand to benefit from a field that embraces fresh ideas and perspectives and values the role that women of all generations play. I thank you very much for your attention.
I hope you all enjoyed that speech as much as I did and were truly inspired by one of the UN's biggest gender champions, Ms. Nakamitsu. And despite her remarks that the UN has a long way to go to achieve gender equality and diversity within nuclear disarmament, I think that having her in such a powerful position is a strong sign of hope with her intersectional approach and also her faith in women and her values of diversity and inclusion. So I think we can all give a little clap to her. And now I will introduce Alan, who will introduce our mini panelists and also say a few things about the event, as he was one of the key organizers. So Alan, you can take the floor.
So thank you very much, Michaela. So I'll introduce the three organizations which are co-hosting the event. Firstly, Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, PNND, of which I'm the global coordinator. And the other two are Youth Fusion, which is the youth network of the Abolition 2000 global civil society network for the elimination of nuclear weapons, and the World Future Council, which is advancing policies to ensure a peaceful and sustainable future. And so PNND, the Global Network of Parliamentarians, has been in existence since 2003, which is when we were established. And right from the start, we were very involved in gender, peace, and disarmed issues. In fact, our first 5 co-presidents were all women. And right from the beginning, they were cooperating on bringing in gender issues and women's participation and leadership into the nuclear disarmament field. And since then, there have been a number of events, appeals, processes where our co-presidents, who now are men and women, and our council members and our members around the world have been taking these issues. So we're very happy to be able to be consolidating and expanding the work that PNND has been doing over the years on gender, peace and disarmament into a more focused program, which is what Vanda will be speaking about later today. This event is also being done in cooperation, as I mentioned, with the World Future Council. And the World Future Council is a group of around about 50 experts who have been involved in leadership levels, whether from their own governments or the United Nations or international organizations or heads of key non-governmental organizations, who have been effective in taking forward policies that will protect the rights of future generations and ensure we have a peaceful and sustainable future. So the World Future Council highlights effective policies and works very closely with PNND as parliamentarians to take forward those policies, to amplify them, to emulate them, to spread them around the world. And of course, the third key partner is Youth Fusion, and the importance of youth, as Ms. Nakamitsu just mentioned, in terms of providing both vision and action and inspiration for a better world, and to engage with those of us in civil society and with parliamentarians in partnership. So that's what this event is about, and PNND is very happy to be working in partnership with Youth Fusion and with World Future Council. So now I'll pass it back to Michaela, who will introduce the first speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. So now we're going to go on to the first mini panel, which is very exciting because these mini panels are truly encompassing the true value of intergenerational dialogue and practicing that. So the first mini panel will be about nuclear security and disarmament in feminist foreign policy. And we will have 2 speakers, Dr. Hetty Fry and Vanessa Lantine. And the first speaker will be Dr. Hetty Fry from Canada, who is the Special Representative on Gender Issues for Parliamentary Assembly of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. So without further ado, Dr. Hetty Fry, we are very excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Michaela, and hello to everyone and a happy International Women's Day to you all. And what an important topic to have on International Women's Day. And especially, I love the intergenerational part of it. I think I began to be involved as a young woman, which was a long time ago, in nuclear disarmament because of an Australian physician named Helen Caldecott. I recall her saying that this is the worst pandemic, this is the worst medical problem that the world will ever face, and that is nuclear war. And she convinced me that I must play a role in it. So I joined a Canadian group called Physicians Against Nuclear War, and then it became Physicians for Social Responsibility, and I continued to be involved in that. And this carries on to today, so that the leadership that Helen Caldecott showed, the fact that she was the first person to speak to this issue was very much inspirational to me, that made me start this journey in which I continue to speak with regard to women involved in peace and disarmament and in peace and security, and finding the frustration that we still do not have many women involved in any aspects of those, despite the United Nations having brought 1325 forward and now pushing for nuclear disarmament. But what I wanted to say is that in Canada right now, we have a feminist international assistance policy. And I think as we talked about how women are are very probably more affected by nuclear disarmament, by war, by conflict, by strife than other gender. It is actually important that we talk about our feminist assistance policy. So Canada has embarked on that, and we've also put it into a national action plan on women in peace and security, and part of that is women in nuclear disarmament. So Canada has been moving forward, but I don't want to talk about Canada. I want to talk about the concept that women, we've seen that COVID has exposed the fact that women are far more vulnerable than we thought. For many of us, we thought that we had moved forward and that we had achieved a whole number of women in politics, in social systems, in cultural systems, in sort of economic arenas. But COVID exposed that is not true. In my country alone, for instance, 1 million women lost their jobs during COVID. Either lost it or had to stay at home and look after seniors and look after their children. And only 500,000 of those have got it back. And this is a year later. So we've seen how women have been impacted. And it's brought us to the forefront that if we do not have women who bring a totally different perspective, a new perspective, an important perspective to looking at the challenges that we face, and part of the International Women's Day is about facing the challenges. And so when we see that the women bring this perspective, we know that men and women work together, that we can get a 360-degree view of the problem, and we can get a 360-degree view of the solutions. So women at the table are really, really important, especially since they have also been extremely impacted. What I wanted to talk about a little was how we need to pass the torch to a new generation. Let us hope that the regression that occurred during COVID for women will not continue, and that young women will pick this torch up that we hand to them and run with it. Because it's so very important from that perspective of problem solving, from the perspective of getting women a place at the table, that we need to talk about this. Nuclear, when I listened to Helen Caldicott so many decades ago, she convinced me that climate change, other diseases, pandemics, such as the one we're facing right now, cannot hold a candle to the problem of an absolutism of nuclear war. That in fact, the world would be totally devastated. There would be no coming back. There would be decades and decades of nuclear winter. That in fact, this is going to be a worse threat to humanity than anything we have ever seen. And that is still true. But most people don't talk about it. Most people don't seem to think about nuclear disarmament anymore. I know that the treaty has not been signed by very many countries. I know that the New START Treaty and the Treaty on Nuclear Disarmament are still there pending. And yet we saw where the clock is on doomsday. The clock is pretty close to midnight still. And if we don't act now, before we know what happens, there would be no coming back. There would be no response if there is a nuclear war. There would be no response if we have the devastation of a nuclear winter for decades to come. The earth will die, as are all the people on it. And I think, you know, this is something that keeps flashing itself in front of me when you see pictures of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and you look at those devastating pictures and you recognize that was only bombs dropped on one part of the world. But if we think about superpowers right now, many of whom are expanding their nuclear ability, and who could, many of them are what we like to call rogue nations. They're nations who don't listen to international law. They do not follow international protocols. They will do what they will do when the time comes. And so we need to be on guard. And I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm saying that we need to be on guard, that this is a reality that could happen. Not only in one small part of the world, but if everyone decides to respond to someone's nuclear arms and to someone's nuclear missiles, then we're going to have a whole lot of countries that are continuing to do this, and we're going to have a global problem here. So I am hoping that we women of my generation can be there and can say to the women that we are partnering with today, such as Vanessa, you know, have my email. Contact me anytime you want. Let us work together hand in hand, bringing my bit of experience, because I've been around this block, used to be Minister for Women's Equality and Multiculturalism in Canada at one time, and now working at OSCE on the issues that women have been facing in terms of migration and looking at nuclear disarmament and women in peace and security. It sometimes seems to women like me, and I don't know if all the other women of my somewhat age group, my age group is very long, I mean, I've been here for a long time, feel sometimes that sense of despair that we feel when we think we have moved forward and suddenly we ratchet back again and we think, what happened here? And you know, but at least I'm saying to celebrate International Women's Day that we need to remember that we must count all the gains, no matter how small they are, no matter how little we have moved forward, whether they're inches or not. Let's celebrate those things, and let's celebrate the role that women can play. And I've noticed around the world that women are standing up. Women are finding their voice. Look at what happened in Poland. Look at what's happening in Belarus. Women are taking to the streets and they're speaking out and they're refusing to be quiet. And this is a movement that you young people like Vanessa can actually grab onto and take a leadership role in. So all of the things we were celebrating on International Women's Day today, such as leadership, etc., it's time for you to take it over. It's time for you to pick up the torch. We're not going to drop the torch. We're going to still be there, standing behind you as you move forward to take the steps that I know that you will take to lead this world forward to a time when we can really talk about peaceful coexistence, when we can really discuss the diversity of our planet and protect that diversity and look at the issues of intersectionality and recognize that sometimes we might even need to talk about the fact that their gender is no longer binary. We cannot speak to binary gender anymore. We have to speak to gender differently. And so I think it's really important that you young women are there taking up that torch, running with it, and that people like me can promise you, I will give you my email, and that you can actually contact me if you need to talk, if you need to do anything, if you need to ask me about my experiences. And I'm hoping that from you, we can find creative ways to tackle the problems we have been struggling with for so long, that you can move us forward with some new ideas, new ways of accomplishing things, all in this spirit of working together, men and women and other gender, to make this all become so. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this. I'm just going to say, Vanessa, please keep in touch with me. And to all of you young women, it is so good to know that somebody would be picking it up where we leave off as we go into the sunset somewhat. So thank you very much, everyone, and a happy International Women's Day.
Thank you, Dr. Fry, for being so open to being a mentor to young women in the field. And thank you for your talk and empowering words. And now we're going to go on to your counterpart, and I will pass the torch to you, Vanessa Lantin, who's the National Coordinator of Voice of Women, as well as one of the winners in the 2020 UN hashtag 75 Words for Disarmament Youth Challenge. So without further ado, Vanessa, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Michaela. It's great to see you again. And hello to everyone, and thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. Special thanks to Dr. Hetty Fry, my panelist pair, for the warm welcome, and PNND for organizing this event. It has been quite a year on what they are calling the Corona Coaster. So whether you are on a high right now or a low, I want to thank you for being here to celebrate International Women's Day. So we are all in this together, and I know that with our collective efforts, we can recover better. My name is Vanessa Lantain, and I'm the National Coordinator at the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace. We are Canada's longest running national women's peace organization, and we speak from an outspoken, critical, intersectional feminist voice. And we believe that we must shift our priorities to human and environmental security to ensure not only human and global survival, but also to be able to support all life systems to reach their fullest potential. So while we experience the effects of the pandemic in different ways, we are told, like I just did a minute ago, that we are all in this together. And while the intention behind the statement is good, we have seen vastly different outcomes between people, and our priorities and viewpoints haven't shifted enough to set us on a path of peace and life. The compounding issues that we are facing have many of us overextending our care quota, leaving us in a deficit, and it is draining. When I tell anyone who will listen to me about the need to abolish nuclear weapons and to support disarmament, I can feel them, and this is not an indictment on them, but I can feel them slowly file away the abolition of nuclear weapons and disarmament into a folder with the label, "Things I need to care about when I can." Like, there is no immediate danger. But here is where I see an opportunity to reach people, because disarmament is both an issue and a solution to our pressing everyday needs. The Gorbachev and Reagan statement in 1985 proclaimed a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. And with that political will, there marked a decline in nuclear warheads from around 70,000 at its peak to around 13,000 today, which shows that nuclear disarmament is not only possible, it has been happening, and we can do it. Because it's complicated, but it's also simple. We cannot afford war. The financial cost, the environmental cost, the cost to our humanity and morality, because it is inhibiting human progress and our financial resources to support people and the planet. So today I want to focus on why our governmental budget is a moral document. So Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. said, "A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death." And unfortunately, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute reported that global military expenditures saw their largest annual increase in a decade in 2019 and are at nearly $2 trillion. In the US alone, they are looking at $1 trillion nuclear forces modernization program. So war and our perspective that having the most lethal and dominant force harms people well before any bomb is dropped. It starts with the conscious decision by elected officials to allocate hundreds of billions towards carbon-intensive weaponry, hurtling us towards climate change tipping points instead of social services like childcare that could help millions of women. So let's talk a little bit about Canada's budget. Canada has plans to buy a whole new slate of weapons, including 15 warships with a lifetime cost of around $213 billion, 88 fighter jets that have an advertised $19 billion price tag, but a newly released report from the No Fighter Jets Coalition, of which VOW is a part of, has put the true cost at around $77 billion over their lifetime. On top of that, billions more for light armored vehicles and armed drones. So that means that my entire working lifetime, I will be paying thousands of dollars for these weapons, which I don't want anything to do with. The F-35 have the ability to become nuclear capable, cost approximately $45,000 an hour to operate, and burn jet fuel at high altitudes, which is particularly environmentally costly. That 1 hour of operation could pay the annual salary of a nurse. One time a bird got stuck in one of the F-35s and it cost $4 million to repair. And Canada has already invested 689 million Canadian taxpayer dollars into the F-35 development, which could pay for the entire Women and Gender Equality Department's current budget for years. And we haven't even bought them yet. So I learned in a meeting with an official from the National Defense in the Gender Diversity and Inclusion Department that they have improved the cockpit to accommodate women's bodies so that they are better able to fly the jets that drop bombs. But I think we should look more deeply, because my concern was that the lives of women who are being bombed are not being taken into account. Canada within NATO flew 10% of the airstrike missions bombing Libya, which state-owned water facilities were a target. This left 4 million Libyans without potable water. NATO also bombed homes with sometimes little to no public evidence of military activity and killed innocent children. So if we want to have a feminist agenda, we must invest in an anti-war perspective and spend to improve on human security, diplomacy, and transparency. And we must understand how weapons drain funds that could be used to support women and life, and the effect these weapons have on people who are bombed. We must include all women to be sure that we all are in this together, and we can recover better to promote a culture of peace. So thanks everyone for listening to me today.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for highlighting how a feminist agenda can really help to highlight the atrocities of war and also to combat them as well. And also highlighting how the investments in military really does drain so many of the resources that can be put to much better use. And I think also in another conversation I had with you a while ago, you were talking about how it's much better to frame nuclear disarmament as an effort to help other issues such as gender equality, climate change, biodiversity, and so on. So thank you so much for highlighting that. And now we are going to come to the part where you will have a discussion now. So I will just read out some questions from the Q&A. So the first one is directed to Dr. Hetty Fry, which is asking why the Canadian government hasn't signed on to the TPNW, and also what is Canada doing to achieve nuclear disarmament apart from this?
Well, I asked the same question. Why hasn't Canada signed on to the treaty yet? But I think that Canada is and intends to. I think their concern is that until the people who actually own nuclear weapons can sign on, anything else seems to be useless. And the idea is to continue the dialogue to get the people who own nuclear weapons to disarm and to get rid of their weapons. So I think that's the thing. Canada has always taken a perspective that if we can negotiate with other people, things will get better. And so for us, the concept is if we sign on to the treaty, we don't even have nuclear arms. And that doesn't stop any of the people who have it. And so that becomes almost the conundrum. How do you sign on to something when you know that you want to be at the table to get the people who are actually owning the arms to get rid of them? And so this is the way that Canada has always looked at any sort of global conflict. We've always tried to get in the middle and see what we can do to move the agenda forward, to negotiate it, etc. So that is the answer with regard to why we haven't signed on.
Thank you for that. And now we have another question directed to you, which is saying, you spoke about handing over the torch to the next generation. What is the most important experience in your life from which the next generation could benefit from?
Well, I think the next generation need to play a role not only as politicians, as I am, but the next generation needs to think about what its role can be. There are so many different roles to play as women. If you're going to support peace, if you're going to support peace, security, if you're going to move forward to help women to achieve the gains that we want them to achieve and to achieve equality and to look at intersectionality. But if I can speak as a politician, as a physician, I started being interested in this issue. I am now a politician, and what I've learned when I rolled up my sleeve and became a politician, I thought I was going to get in there and just like make it happen because, you know, there was this principle involved and there was all of this urgency to make things happen. And when I got there, I realized that until we can get enough women into politics to change the institutions themselves from within, that we have to realize that within politics, things move forward very slowly. In Canada, when I ran on the issue of amending the Human Rights Act, sexual orientation as a prohibited ground for discrimination. We did that within less than a year. And then all of the pieces that followed, the equalization of legal status, the equalization of pensionable benefits, health, medical care, the same-sex marriage, took us 10 years to achieve. And that is because governments need to lead, but if you go too far ahead, the people won't follow you. And I think you need to be able to do this, educating of the people to understand why the thing you are doing is important and what must happen. But you need to recognize that the patience of getting there, inch by inch and inch by inch, and we did get there. We did get to a lot of things I started with, but it took longer than I thought. I thought I was just going to walk in and fix it. And so that is something I'd like to say, have patience, recognize and understand how systems work currently so that you can work with the system to get into the system to change the system. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think that we'll all remain steady and patient in our efforts. And Vanessa, I think if you have anything to add to that, along with answering a question, how do you counter the frustration and hopelessness feeling in the younger generations?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, I'd have to say, I mean, we just have to come back to hope. And, you know, as our issues compound, we can feel that our youth are getting bogged down with the weight of the problems of the world. And so when I talk about disarmament, I really like to highlight the potential to free up much needed public funds to support a green recovery, a she-covery, and to improve the likelihood that they will get a sustainable job. So focusing on the hope and focusing on what disarmament can bring to the table for youth, I think is really important. And I think it's especially important as you know, as the panelists have said right now, that women are involved and get to the highest levels of decision making within nuclear policy, because women are affected biologically more than men. And so we have so much to lose if, you know, radiation levels from a bomb or a nuclear meltdown happen. Women have to be more careful because our bodies react differently than men's to radiation, to ionizing radiation. So I think that we must get more youth involved to have more hope, and we must ensure that women are at the table, because we have a lot to risk if there ever is a nuclear war or meltdown or increased radiation in the environment.
Thank you, and I think that this will segue nicely into the next question, which is, how can we get the feminine voices of global citizenry of all ages to chime in here? For example, how can we get here that no one can ignore?
Are you looking for answers from Vanessa or me?
I think
or
both.
Anyone?
Anyone. I think this is this wasn't directed to anyone. So if anyone has any thoughts on that, then you can take the floor. We have about 2 more minutes until this session is over. So
Well, then nobody's answering, so I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to say that I think, given that the youth of today are so very good with social media, they know how to use it well, they should use it more to speak about these issues. They should be bombarding social media with the issues of disarmament, with the issues of women, peace and security, with the long-term effects of war of any kind, nuclear or not, with what conflict is doing, as Vanessa said, to our world, and with what we could do with that money if we looked at how we can deal with poverty and disease and social constructs and the things that we need to move our world closer together in terms of its economic positions. And so I think that's what I would like to see, this bombardment of social media, because that's what your generation reads all the time. And so you've got to get in there, and you've got to talk about it, you've got to sell it, you've got to work it the way you just did today, and say, here's what we need to do. Let's get behind something, because powerlessness is felt when you feel you can't do anything about something. But if you go out there and you hand the solutions, the hope, the arguments to youth, they may not begin to feel so powerless. They may begin to think that, hey, we can do stuff. Let's get together and start banding together to do things. So I think that's what I have to say in my 2 bits.
thank you. And I think, Vanessa, you had some sentiments to build on to that.
Yes, I completely agree with Dr. Hedy Fry, especially since the pandemic is still in full swing, and we should be safe when we do our activism. But things that I would like to see would be a nuclear disarmament TikTok dance, or why don't we get Snapchat filters for, you know, no more nukes or something like that. Like, let's get creative. I think what really makes the peace movement so special and exciting is the inclusion of arts, of dance, you know, of all of these music, all these different creative avenues, because these are quite dark and heavy topics. So let's bring some light into them to allow us to better see, you know, the hope and the life and peace, you know, in these sort of dark times right now. So I think including the arts and music and creativity and social media to bring peace and disarmament right to where youth are, which is on their screens right now, is a great idea.
Fantastic. Well, that rounds this mini panel up. So thank you so much to Vanessa and Dr. Fry for your words. And I think we've learned a lot and we've been inspired by both of you. So thank you so much again. And now we will move on to the second mini panel, which is on shifting security frameworks in nuclear armed states from nuclear deterrence to common security. So during this mini panel, we will have Baroness Sue Miller, Nico Edwards, and Yasmin Silva as our highly esteemed speakers. So the first speaker to go will be Baroness Sue Miller from the UK, who is a PNND co-president, member of the UK House of Lords, and vice chair of the UK All-Party Parliamentary Group on Global Security and Non-Proliferation. So Baroness Sue Miller, you can take the floor now.
Hi, good evening, everybody, or good morning and afternoon to those of you who are not in Europe. It's really fantastic to be here on International Women's Day, and I congratulate the organisers on the theme of this panel. I think there's nothing I would like to be discussing more actually on International Women's Day, because this is the issue that got me into politics in the first place. And I know what you asked me to talk about, but actually I'm probably going to talk a little bit more personally, and I don't want to repeat anything that we've already heard. So I am going to just refer to why I became involved in it, and then why I think that the issue has become so stuck in the UK. So for myself, I became involved when the women of Greenham Common, which was a big collection of women who came together to object to the cruise missiles that had been brought over from the USA, to object to them being based on UK soil. And many women camped there, and we ringed the military base over Easter. It was really powerful being there with lots of women. I didn't camp myself, and that's because my daughter had just been born a little bit earlier, so I used to turn up with the pushchair and stay for the day. And I'm sure it was because I had a young baby that I was more motivated to think about the rights of future generations. So when, Vanessa, you talked about the rights of future generations, I think that's exactly the correct thing to be talking about. For women, that's so powerful. We're biologically more inclined to consider that, whether or not they're children of our own. I think that we are better at thinking long term. So the Greenham Common protest was eventually entirely successful, and the cruise missiles, the government at the time, of course, said it wasn't due to the Greenham women, but I think history has proved that it was, and the cruise missiles were taken back to the United States, leaving us with, of course, Trident now, but it was a victory. However, since then, I think the mentality in the UK, and especially in Parliament, has become very stuck at the end of the Cold War. So when this issue is debated, we are still hearing the sorts of comments that were made towards the end of the 1980s. And as a woman, speaking on these issues, I think you face far more accusations of being naive, of being unrealistic, of just being idealistic. The sort of typical comment will be, well, it takes a military realist to understand that unilateralism isn't possible. And the government and the Parliament all say that multilateralism is, of course, desirable, and everybody's working towards it. But when it comes to it, there are no moves towards it. It's just you find more funding going to modernise the Trident programme, which of course Parliament or the House of Commons have just voted for again and again and again under all sorts of different political party controls. And really every major political party is at the moment committed to renewing Trident. So how do we change that dialogue? And I think in considering that, we have to think it's perhaps even more difficult than it was 10 years ago, because I detect, certainly in the UK, a lot of new feeling of patriotism. When you look at all of the things that happened around Brexit and the fishermen, and somehow supporting the rights of fishermen became equal to ruling the waves and Britain being great again. You know, it's illogical. And now the fishermen have discovered that actually, you know, they were sold down the river, so to speak, and that Brexit isn't helping them. And that I think that we have to counter the idea that disarmament is weak and unpatriotic. I think the pandemic has given us a wonderful opportunity in this, that if we start to look at the economics of it and how unaffordable Trident is, and how spending money on that will take away from the rights of future generations, whether it's for investment in healthcare or education, that will be a very sound basis for moving forward. So what should parliamentarians do? Well, I absolutely agree. Women have to support each other in this, because it's a pretty unfriendly place out there, especially as you get into Parliament and start to talk about these issues. But then there are some tremendous role models. And in the UK, one of mine was Shirley Williams, who was a real person of arguing the case intellectually as to why we should not invest in a nuclear future. And as I look around the world now this year, you know, you've got Greta Thunberg, of course, on climate change. You've got Stacey Abrams on democratic rights. You've got all sorts of people on, well, Amanda Gorman was a wonderful example of the power of the arts actually to bring people together. And of course, all of them women. And there are lots and lots of really powerful role models. But what I would say to you of the younger generation, and it rather reflects the answers to the last questioner, which is do embrace the things that we can't as older people, we're not so good at it, which is social media. I've actually never been on TikTok, I'm afraid, but I think it's incredibly powerful. The very fact we're able to meet like this is powerful, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Nico Edwards is going to say. But I think that the ability to support each other without even meeting in person is new and something we should treasure. And so I feel hopeful as far as that's concerned. And I feel hopeful that we've got so many of you, energetic younger generation, who will hopefully have much more ability to question the static nature of the argument between nuclear powers and really the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Baroness Sumela, for giving us a perspective from the UK, first of all, and also for sort of reaffirming the youth's sentiments towards nuclear disarmament and having a more responsible distribution of our government budgets, not towards more nuclear weapons. So now we will go to Nico Edwards, who is from Sweden, but based in the UK. She is one of my colleagues who I enjoy working with very much on a daily basis at the PNND Gender and Security Program, where she is one of our program officers. So Nico, you can take the floor now.
Thank you very much for that, Michaela. I extend my heartfelt greetings to all the panelists and attendees who have joined us on this International Women's Day, both to launch the PNND's Gender, Peace and Security Program and to partake in today's many well-needed discussions. And I'm equally delighted to have been partnered with Baroness Sue Miller and Jasmine Silva in addressing the issue of how to promote and achieve common security frameworks in opposition to today's continued reliance upon nuclearism, as has been spelled out previously. And I think, first of all, when addressing this panel topic, it is important to note that each of the nuclear armed and allied states face very different conditions for challenging the belief in deterrence, legally, politically, economically, and socially. And so needless to say, there is not a one size fits all. Yet I would here like to tease out three underlying factors that can take various expressions depending on political context, but which I believe are overlapping stepping stones in creating the conditions as well as providing the tools for shifting security dialogue and policy within the nuclear armed and allied states. And these includes and build upon what has already been said in the previous panels, to apply feminist approaches to international diplomacy and cooperation, shifting underlying understandings of security away from force and competition-based definitions, and finally, moving the nuclear weapons and other military industries' money towards sustainable industries and sustainable peace and security initiatives. Now, what I wish to achieve by applying a feminist lens to international relations is primarily to expose the illusion that deterrence makes us safer, including that the acquisition of any weapon in the long term makes anyone safer. And relatedly, that deterrence and the possession of nuclear weapons are considered rational security measures, responding to the real threats that derive from an international arena in which interstate competition is simply inevitable. And feminists understood long ago that just as the power dynamics that we live by today are man-made, they can be unmade. And one of the key shifts brought about by Sweden's turn to feminist foreign policy was to reconsider international relations as the basis for cooperation, solidarity, and non-violence. In other words, at least in theory, laying the framework for a truly common understanding of security, as opposed to one based on the idea of power as a zero-sum game. Now, the illusion of nuclear security models has already been spelled out in a variety of contexts. Some great legal examples of this, apart from the most recent ban treaty, can be found in the advisory opinions of the International Court of Justice from 1996 and the UN Human Rights Committee in 2018, which together have declared the threat or use of nuclear weapons as contrary to international humanitarian law and in violation of the right to life. Now, I think we need to build on the knowledge already established with these instruments and the momentum already forming within numerous nuclear armed and allied states. Because in the UK alone, there are plenty of cross-sectoral initiatives that draw on the combined force of academia, civil society campaigning, and parliamentary advocacy. And part of their objective is to get a public conversation running on how to rethink security and reframe defense, domestic, and foreign policies in order to adequately address the true threats and needs of our time, all of which have been spelled out before me, but that can also be found among the Sustainable Development Goals. And as has also recently been said, the COVID-19 pandemic is just one proof of the dangers that arise when we continue to view the international arena as a playground for military power, where real threats require force-based responses and peacemaking happens by virtue of intimidation. And as so many have said before me, we need to entirely shift this understanding of military security towards common and human security frameworks, simply because they are based on an acceptance that none of us are truly safe before all of us are truly safe. And sadly, a significant reason behind why this shift has proven to be so hard fought remains the monetary interests that continue to make a force-based international system a source of profit. And as we go forward, I think we need to target the intersections between economic and political interests that continue to buttress deterrence theories as realistic, and which in turn, because of the illusory profitability of nuclear and other defense industries, continue to impact upon public opinion, particularly in nuclear armed and allied states, in truly harmful and misleading ways. Consequently, as a last note, we must promote policy options that prove that it is economically beneficial for banks, pension funds, cities, and governments to divest from nuclear and other weapons industries. And this is a turn that has already been taken in some non-nuclear states. But I also think in pursuing divestment, conversion, and diversification across these industries, there need to be clear lines of communication between grassroots movements, labor community representatives, and national and international policymakers. And I think that we need to create a common language that stands a chance at informing public opinion in a way that clearly makes a connection between the $105 billion that are spent annually on nuclear weapons that could otherwise be funding a green, peaceful, and just global transition. So to conclude, I think the sense of urgency among people, especially from my generation, but also beyond, is another momentum to be built upon. And global youths today, as we've seen in this program already, continue to foster truly common frameworks for how to redefine security in ways that account for the well-being of future generations as much as our own. And such versions of security do not have room for weapons of mass destruction. So thank you all for your attention. And on this note, I pass the floor back to you, Michaela.
Thank you so much, Nico. And I think your point that power dynamics are man-made and therefore can be unmade is so powerful, especially in your recommendations towards pursuing nuclear disarmament through better communications is such a strong way to move forward. And I think that we can all keep that notion with us moving forward. So thank you again. And now we will hear from Yasmin Silva, who is based in New York. And she is the Partnerships Manager of Beyond the Bomb, as well as team member of the 2020 Counter Nuclear Weapons Money Action in New York. So without further ado, Yasmin, you can take the floor.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone attending today. I'm very happy to join you on International Women's Day. So as Michaela introduced, my name is Yasmin Silva. I'm the Partnerships Manager at Beyond the Bomb. And we are a US-based grassroots movement working to mobilize the next generation to prevent nuclear war and eliminate nuclear weapons, as well as the structures that uphold them, and simultaneously fight for justice in communities that have been impacted by nuclear weapons in the United States. So I take a pretty intersectional approach to my work, and I think many of us have discussed this, but I'd like to go a little further in depth on that. So my background before I joined the nuclear space, I was actually a grassroots organizer on a number of other issues in the United States. I worked on reproductive justice, I worked on labor rights, I've worked for environmental justice and I think I said reproductive justice. But all of this to say, my work really spanned the spectrum of progressive work happening in the United States, and yet I had never, while my background and my education is in international work and anti-militarism, I had never really considered the ways that I myself, as a young citizen in the United States, could impact something as large as our nuclear policy. And the way that I came into this movement was actually a number of other young women that I was mentored by to really explain to me how our government has kept us in the dark, how budgetary processes in the United States are so arcane that we're made to feel as if we can't influence. Me, someone with a background on how to exert citizen power, hadn't even considered the ways in which I could engage on this. And so I realized that we were really missing a key component in the anti-nuclear movement, which was people my age and how we could get involved. So I got involved, and I'm really passionate about bringing other people along for the ride and showing them that the power is in their hands. So to talk a little bit about the United States and how we can move from the frameworks we're in to the world that we want to see, I think it's been really clear now for a long time that the US public has been sold on a very specific view of security and what that looks like. But as a lot of speakers have mentioned, COVID-19 has really upended all of those views and exposed how in this country we're ill-equipped for the actual threats that are facing Americans today. And as many speakers have also pointed to, women historically and today are the most impacted by these decisions of where our money and our priorities lie as a country in our lives. But I think that we, because of these factors, have a unique opportunity to lay bare why nuclear weapons don't keep us safe, and how during the last US administration, we moved even beyond deterrence, I would argue, into creating nuclear weapons that could be used to initiate a nuclear attack, which hasn't been seen in a very long time. And so not only is this unacceptable and exacerbates human security woes, but it really, as we've moved into this next administration, presents us with a unique moment to pull ourselves back from the edge and set ourselves on a new path, one that puts human security needs first. And by doing so, I believe opens the door to integrate common security measures in place of military ones. Like I said, the pandemic has just laid bare and opened the door for us to imagine what a world would look like in different ways. And obviously, the US government is being kind of dragged along forcibly. The new administration just passed a new stimulus package here in the United States to the tune of $1.9 trillion. And this is a really great victory for the people of the United States because it offers some much needed relief across the board. But some legislators have questioned why we're spending so much money on human needs. And yet those same legislators do not question why the US government is slated to spend also close to $2 trillion modernizing the nuclear arsenal. And so this is really a moment to engage with the idea that budgets are moral documents and where has security failed us in the past and what will it be moving forward. So women, and particularly women of color, have been hit hardest during the pandemic. And we know that it has been mentioned that many women have left or been forced out of the workforce. And if they aren't overwhelmed with responsibilities that traditionally fall on women for work, they're juggling all the things at once. And for me, something that's really important in my work is taking a lens that puts the most vulnerable first and finding solutions to the interconnected problems that create that vulnerability in the first place. So that's what I think of when I think of human security. And I think that common security flows out of decentering and eliminating nuclear weapons just feels like a natural outcome of prioritizing human needs above military might and power. And I think this also harkens back to the idea of feminist foreign policy, which I know some of our panelists discussed before. So I think that movements in the United States, especially outside of the nuclear space, are realizing that hypermilitarization here has led to many of the systems and structures that make people an afterthought. And these movements are being led by young women. For that reason, given the new ground that we have in the administration, I think it will take a robust intersectional grassroots movement to address the prominence of nuclear weapons in the United States, and a focus on peeling back the layers of nuclear reliance in the US for us that Beyond the Bomb starts with no first use. But as we do this, we must push firmly for other positive change in the United States that centers human needs and security. Nuclear weapons are a macro masculinized version of US militarism, but militarized police, cultural responses to sexual assault, lack of recognition of women's labor, both formal and informal, are all part of the problem. If we chip away at one, we chip away at all and can work towards shifting the culture and priorities of the United States. And I think that that's the strength of including young women, both in movements and by following their leadership, is these connections are intuitive to a lot of the way that we approach our work. So I'm excited to make connections here today and continue pushing forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yasmin, for giving us a perspective on the US side of things, and also giving us a bit of new hope with the new US administration, and also giving us a very intersectional view on things. I think also you were initially supposed to speak on women of color and nuclear disarmament, so thank you for also bringing that up. And now we will go to the Q&A session for this round, which we have 10 minutes for. And we have a first question for Yasmin, which asks, how can we cooperate Black Lives Matter within the nuclear disarmament movement?
That's a great question. And obviously dependent on context in your country, right? So I want to couch that my answers are very US specific. I think that's a really loaded question, because I think there's a lot of mistrust between different movements in the United States. And I think that goes back to oftentimes the disarmament movement being seen, the way I refer to it, if I'm being very frank, is male, stale, and pale. And so there's a lot of distrust that Black communities aren't prioritized within the space. And so I think Vanessa really hit the nail on the head when we're discussing our agenda and seen as the cost benefit analysis of what are we missing by investing in these weapons. Where are we not investing? And we're not investing in communities of color. In the United States, Flint, Michigan still doesn't have drinkable water. Right? And think about what a small percentage of the nuclear budget it would take to fix that problem. So I think it's both understanding the trade-offs and really, and not only understanding the trade-offs, but advocating for those trade-offs to happen, but also showing up authentically for Black communities. When they have an action that's going on, it's not only uplifting that action, even if it has nothing to do with nuclear weapons, but it's showing up, whether in these times that's digitally, whether that's in person, because we can't build authentic relationships and connections unless we're really having each other's back. So those are just some ways that I would say we can start bridging that gap.
Most definitely, I can definitely agree with that. And Baroness Sue Miller, you have your hand up for a comment.
Yes, thank you. I think that's a really interesting question, because one of the things that occurred to me as the UN Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was getting signed and ratified, and then the nuclear weapon states were really pushing back against that, was that that effort to get it signed and ratified was happening in parallel really with the Black Lives Matter movement. And what it looks like is that the nuclear weapon states, who are overwhelmingly white, are actually saying to all of those who signed and ratified that actually we're the nuclear weapon states and your lives don't matter to us so much. So whilst we're not talking about the Black lives in the nuclear weapon states, I think on a national basis, it's a terrible comment from the nuclear weapon states. And I very much like Yasmina's comment that we chip away at one thing that we perceive and we chip away at everything in a very cohesive way. So I think, Yasmin, you're absolutely right that there are so many connections here, but I think the UN ban treaty actually does show up why there's still a rather imperialist attitude amongst the nuclear weapons states, that the rest of the world may have signed the treaty, but it doesn't really matter. And we need to say why it does. Thank you.
Thank you for supplementing Yasmin's answer, and I think that was also a very good point. Next, to keep up with the intersectional spirit, there's a question aimed to Nico Edwards, which is asking, why is the younger generation more concerned with climate change? For example, the Fridays for Future movement, as opposed to nuclear disarmament issues.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a really good question that also ties in with what I was talking about, because I think a significant and sad reason behind this remains the utter lack of education and general informing of the public, especially within the nuclear-armed and allied states, regarding nuclear weapons issues, and especially with regards, I think, to the current escalation in nuclear rhetoric and nuclear arms races. And obviously, climate issues have enjoyed a lot of space and attention for a good amount of years now, which is, we need that, and it's a really good thing, and arguably still it has not enjoyed as much as it needed actually to see the proper change in the right direction. But I think the green movement, especially as it relates to involving youth, perhaps has failed in highlighting that climate action is really inseparable from nuclear disarmament. And the two issues are just so intimately related to each other, both when it comes to budgetary decisions, but also when it comes to the de facto climate effects, negative climate effects, environmental effects that the production and testing and development and everything of nuclear weapons have, even including the storing of them. So I think, as I mentioned before, we within the disarmament movement also have to scale up our informing of public opinion, and especially when it comes to youth, with regards to both the budgetary and other decisions that are being taken now with regards to nuclear policies. And I think in doing so, which we are already doing, but we need to connect with the larger youth networks that work within the green movement, and specifically now with regards to a green transition. Yeah, I think that's how I'd sum the issue up.
Thank you so much for that very comprehensive answer, Nico. I think we can all agree with you there. And now we have another statement and question from the chat box that says, 10 years of war in Syria and the contribution of Iran, Russia, and Turkey, and the international position towards these countries is still hesitant. Do you think that the lack of participation of women in decision-making is the reason why the world does not care about our issues that transcend the limits of the crisis of one nation? And this isn't directed to any one speaker. So I think if anyone wants to answer this, then they can raise their hand and speak.
Can I have a go?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not my area of expertise at all, but I would have to say, yes, I think I completely agree that the lack of women around the table in this situation hasn't helped. And if you look back to somebody whose politics I certainly didn't always share, but was somebody who really brought people together very well, which was Madeleine Albright. I feel if we had more diplomats like her working away behind the scenes, we would have got to a much better place. But yes, I mean, the Syrian situation is really absolutely terrible, and I blame ourselves as the UK Parliament who voted against any action because we were so nervous after what had happened in Iraq that we didn't like to think of action. But we've all failed, but certainly if more women were involved, perhaps it might be more positive. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nico, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, no, I just want to add a quick point to that, because I think definitely we need more women at this kind of decision making table, as I said. Shifting ideas of international relations as this arena for competition and for force-based understandings of peace and security. But I also think, and there's an important distinction to be made between simply adding women to the decision-making table and also advocating for this de facto shift in thinking around international relations and peace and security interventions, because as we've seen, sadly, in so many contexts as far, even in peace and conflict-related contexts, simply adding women with a mentality or a view of international relations that is still in line with hegemonic ways of thinking about these issues, it doesn't change anything. So I think we always have to keep in mind that it's not simply an issue of equal representation, but it's also an issue of equal representation when it comes to minds' viewpoints.
Definitely, I think implementing a gender perspective is a big thing that we need to take forward, and not just sort of add women in the mix and stir and think it'll be better. We need to look at the structures critically. So thank you so much to Baroness Humilla, to Nico and Yasmin for a wonderful and fruitful second mini panel. Now we have come to a break. So you can all take 9 minutes now and be back at 8 o'clock so we can get on to the third panel of the evening. I hope everyone feels a little bit refreshed after the short break. So now I'm going to introduce to you my wonderful colleague Wanda Prushkova from the Czech Republic, who's going to give an introduction to PNND's Gender, Peace and Security Program. Wanda is the director of the PNND program on gender, peace and security, as well as the vice chair of the Prague Vision Institute for Sustainable Security. So Wanda, go ahead and explain what the Gender, Peace and Security Program is all about.
Thank you for the introduction, Michaela. And hello, everyone. So again, on behalf of the whole team of the PNND Gender, Peace and Security Program, thank you so much, not just to the panelists, but to everyone in the attendees section for being here. We're really glad that so many, and not only women, individuals from such different backgrounds and in locations have come together today to listen to our wonderful panelists and to launch this program. And so we realize how many Zoom events there are today that one could choose from. So we are truly honored that you chose to celebrate the role of women in nuclear disarmament and security here with us. So as we're launching a new program, I think it's also as important to mention that PNND has always been committed to gender inclusion and equity, not only in its organizational structure, but also in its activities across all of the programs. So as you have already heard from Alan before, our first 5 co-presidents were actually all women. And if you look at our council, they're really, well, we continue with a balance of female and male members. And if you go even further and look at our teams of staff and coordinators and interns, I'd even say that there's more women than men right now, which is very exciting. So for a long time, we wanted to create something, a program that would highlight all of the activities in this era. So in 2019, you might remember we've coordinated an international conference in Prague, which was commemorating the life and work of the wonderful Berta von Suttner. Then in 2020, we put together and launched the Women's Peace and Disarmament Appeal for Human Security. And later that year, we also published a special section on women's participation in disarmament in the Parliamentary Handbook on Disarmament for Security and Sustainable Development, which, even though that is a parliamentary handbook, I would recommend everyone to read it. There is really something for everyone and a lot of ideas and examples that we all can learn from. And now finally, in the making, we have an article and podcast series engaging with influential women leaders in the peace and nuclear disarmament fields. So to further address these issues, both in ways of thinking and in our organizational structure, we decided to launch our own Gender, Peace and Security program, a program on gender inclusion, equity, perspectives, and issues relating to nuclear disarmament, but also peace, security, and the broader field of sustainable development. So what is our gender approach? It basically includes a dial focus. First, on the gender inclusion in program activities and positions of authority. We know that the security sectors have been dominated by the perspectives and experiences of men in the leadership positions. And I think that all of us here can agree that we really need this gender discourse for more effective decision-making and policy development. And then the second focus would be on the incorporation of different gender approaches to security in both social and political systems. And of course, specifically in the field of nuclear disarmament. And here really gender plays out in 3 key ways. So apart from the already mentioned inclusion, gender approach also pays more attention to human security and common security, as opposed to the traditional establishments, which include, for example, nuclear deterrence. And thirdly, nuclear weapons impact. As we all know, as weapons productions, testing, deployment, or even the use of nuclear weapons impact women and men differently. For example, the radioactive contamination from nuclear testing has significant and discriminatory physical impacts on childbearing women and is thus creating additional social and political impact on them. So we're also glad that this aspect has been recognized in the UN Secretary General's disarmament agenda released in 2018 and entitled Security Over Common Future, and that it recognizes this. So in brief, this is where we're going with this program. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, what we want to do in the near future, I'll post a link in the chat so that you can study up. Again, thank you everyone for being here, celebrating the role of women in nuclear disarmament, and also engaging in the Q&A. It's wonderful to see so many questions and such an active audience. So thank you, and have a great rest of the event.
Thank you, Wanda, for explaining the Gender, Peace and Security program so nicely. And now we are going to move on to our third mini panel of the evening, which is Nuclear Disarmament and Grassroots and Interfaith Action, where we will have Monica Willard and Leila Hasadedek Dapo talk about the role of religion and grassroots movements in nuclear disarmament. Our first speaker will be Monica Willard from the US, who is part of the United Religions Initiative representative to the United Nations, as well as the co-chair of the International Day of Peace NGO Committee at the UN. Ms. Monica Willard, you are welcome to take the floor now.
Thank you. What a joy to celebrate International Women's Day with you wonderful women. It has been exciting to hear the panelists before and the speakers. And I just echo what has been said. To be on a panel with so many incredibly bright and incredibly active young women is such a joy. It is just a gift to know some of you personally, and beyond that, to have seen you on other webinars or events before today. Most of you all of you are familiar in one way or another to me, so I'm honored to meet you. I'm here because of grassroots activism. The URI is it's probably the largest interfaith grassroots organization. It brings people together in over 108 countries in what we call cooperation circles. And these cooperation circles are people from at least 3 distinct spiritual traditions. I think in many of the areas, some of the leadership is far more male than what I would just like to see. And I think that we are working very much into balance and bringing that in. We have both an interim director that's just been announced this week. Actually, she took her job, and that is Swamini Saraswati. And we have Kiran Bali as chair of our board from the UK. So some of you might know these women from their activist roles in other areas as well. Talking specifically on the nuclear issue, I'm honored to be on this panel with other people I've worked with in URI and where we've had intersectional meetings, and I'm going to let Kekishan share her experiences. As I won't talk about what we are doing with youth in URI per se, and Ligia, why you have so much to say on the youth as well. So I'm going to look at it from a little different perspective. And we've talked about the parliamentarians, and we've talked about activists. But one of the things that the interfaith and religious people bring to it is a spirit, and that spirit of peace, the spirit of cooperation. But it also brings religious documents, because at least in the Protestant traditions, and the Pope has come out very firmly opposed to nuclear weapons. And many of the Protestant traditions, I only know more about the United States, and that is they have different meetings and they set their policies. And some of them might need to be dusted off on nuclear abolition, but there is no religious organization that says, let's make nuclear weapons. Let's make these dangerous, insane things. Gee, let us really base our policy on mutually assured destruction. That sounds like a sane thing to do. I mean, where are we? We absolutely need to bring a different shift of spirit. We have to bring in the spirit on the humanitarian aspect and looking at how we need to meet on the intersectional level. We have to look at the other problems and the insane amount of money that is being spent on nuclear weapons, when when in the 80s, gee, that's a lot of decades ago now, in the 80s, Mikhail Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan said, a nuclear war can never be won. Therefore, it should never be fought. Why are we still using these insane tactics to intimidate and to control? It is a different form of colonization and patriarchy. And we absolutely must demand a shift because we can't afford it. And it's time that we really, really include future generations. This is not a new concept. The indigenous communities have always looked at 7 generations. Most of the people in the United States can't even go back 7 generations because of where we are. Many people in other parts of the world have lived in the same locality and can go back even beyond 7 generations. Don't we need to unite to protect this planet so that everyone can look ahead 7 generations at least? I mean, we have to shift our spirit. We must look at nuclear weapons as an insane way of protecting anyone because it offers nothing but insecurity, economic insecurity and physical insecurity. No one really talks about how many people were vaporized when we dropped atom bombs on living cities. And it wasn't until this summer when I looked into, we were doing a lot of celebrations around the 75th anniversary of the UN, but also of looking at the use of nuclear weapons. We looked a little bit more at Nagasaki and how that really was never supposed to have happened from many different perspectives. And there is even a journalistic book called Fallout that came out this year talking about the mistakes that had happened before Nagasaki. And it's so documented. I was a little surprised, having been in the nuclear activities since the 80s, actually in the 70s, for nuclear power. But we need to look at what happened. And these weapons that are happening now are so much more potent than the ones that were dropped. And can anybody with a sane thought think that this is safety, that this is something that we can use? It breaks every humanitarian law about use of weapons in war. It's indiscriminate and it kills hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And it would be more than just millions should there be an actual exchange. So I want to say we need to shift our spirit. And I would like to share with you a prayer that we use at Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons, one of the cooperation circles of the United Religions Initiatives, which was, this prayer was written by our founder. He was serving as the bishop, the Episcopal Bishop of the state of California for over 25 years, Bishop William Swing, and he got into all kinds of things as an Episcopal priest, bishop, in humanitarian efforts, and has truly looked at health and the AIDS epidemic, the different hospitals in San Francisco. He has been such a contributor to shifts in patterns, and he has taken nuclear weapons as both a personal expression, and he's made it somewhat of a collective expression of our organization because he was the founder. And we have to stop and think about it and the wisdom that he shares. And he wrote a prayer, and it's called the Nuclear Prayer. The beginning and the end are in your hands, O Creator of the universe. And in our hands, you have placed the fate of this planet. We who are tested by having both creative and destructive power in our free will, turn to you in sober fear and in intoxicating hope. We ask for your guidance and to share in your imagination and our deliberations about the use of nuclear force. Help us to lift the fog of atomic darkness that hovers so pervasively over our Earth, your Earth, so that soon all eyes may see light magnified by your pure light. Bless all of us who wait today for your presence and who dedicate ourselves to achieve your intended peace and rightful equilibrium on earth. In the name of all that is holy and all that is hoped. Every time I hear that, different words jump out at me. And one is, the fate of the planet is in our hands. And so how are we going to collectively move us to a different place? I heard some wonderful suggestions before, putting the humanitarian emphasis as opposed to might and bullets. We've got to make this shift for economics, but for our souls. Mahatma Gandhi made the comment when the bomb was dropped on Japan that the soul of Japan was destroyed for a short time. But what is it going to mean for the soul of the country who dropped it? Now, I don't know that we're seeing some of that manifestation, but I do believe that nuclear weapons are a collective trauma, and we need to take and deal with our conscious and our spirits and move it, and things like the arts. And I'm going to show you one very effective arts project, and I think I've talked over my time, and I'm sorry, but in the 80s, for the 40th anniversary of the anniversaries of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there was a group, and it started out long before the internet, because this is the 80s, and it started out with a Christmas card list, and then it expanded, and it asked people to put on cloth what you cannot bear to think of as lost forever in the event of a nuclear war. And these were going to be tied around the Pentagon on the 40th anniversary of the bombings. Now we're at 75, we still have nuclear weapons, but they've gone down in number, as somebody mentioned earlier. But look at this. There were enough of these to go around the Pentagon, tied one to another, cross the bridge, go down the mall, all the way to the Capitol. And you saw how far the march to the Capitol was with violent people. We were there with the hopes, dreams, and prayers of people. It also went around the Hiroshima Dome that same day. This art project touched me deeply. I said, when I found the one that I'd made at the Pentagon, I very jokingly said to my husband and my family, who were young at that point, I'm tied into this forever because you tied from one to the other and you made a big ribbon. It predated the AIDS quilt. And I just ask each of you and anybody listening to this on Facebook, what would you put on a ribbon? What is your message? What got you involved? And then I'm going to suggest, with just a little bit of propaganda, I guess, to go to voices.uri.org, www.voices-uri.org, and take a look at a document video that was made that showed the voices of Gorbachev and George Shultz looking at Reykjavik. It showed a lot of things, but the 75th anniversary of the bombs was celebrated and documented by us with an amazing event. And I ask you to take the message. And I'm not just you on this screen who are doing this all the time, but people who might hear this on Facebook, to your churches, to your schools, to your libraries, to the children, anybody who'll listen. We need to get this out. So I look to the youth for the ideas, the concerts, the social media, whatever, but the arts and prayer. Don't forget the prayer and the church communities. Thank you very much. And I have to end with the prayer that I use all the time. May peace prevail on earth.
Thank you so much, Ms. Willard, for your your speech and also for sharing this perspective of grassroots and interfaith organizations and how they can have such a strong impact in putting a more human face on the nuclear disarmament movement and showing truly how you can be connected in many ways and also making these connections to the soul and the soul of the nation and how nuclear weapons can be harmful to that. So thank you very much. And now we have our next speaker, Leila Hasandedik-Dapo from Bosnia and Herzegovina, who works for the European Liaison and is an officer for the United Religions Initiative, and is also a board member of the European Interfaith Youth Network. So Leila, you can take the floor. And I think you've also put the prayer in the chat for everyone to see.
Yes, thank you, Michaela. And there were some questions in the chat for the prayer, so I use opportunity while Monica was nicely explaining the rest of her speech to put it over there for everyone so that they can have it and come back to this beautiful prayer. So greetings of peace, everyone, and happy International Women's Day for all these incredible women who already shared these great stories and initiative, and congratulations on all your amazing work that you are doing in your respective organization and communities. It is my great honor and pleasure to be here today with you, and congratulations to organizer for this beautiful panel discussion, which will, I'm sure, inspire a lot of lawmakers and government to take some more concrete action. But now we need to focus on a grassroots level, or what we can do as you and me and all of us who are gathering here today, because when we are discussing about topic of nuclear disarmament, usually focuses on the lawmakers, government, politicians, different institutions, but we forgot that all of us can do quite a lot and that we all take responsibility for the future of the world. And as we saw, the nuclear weapons are threatening our world, so we need to take something to stop this threat. And definitely focus should be on the faith-based organizations, and Monica already explained it is so important to focus on the spiritual level because we are all for spiritual human beings, and 80% of the people living today on the earth are driven by different kinds of spiritual values and faiths that are connected directly with and also form the basis for their values. So it is important to take into consideration this huge amount of people who are strongly believing in different spiritual or faith traditions. And the legal prohibition against nuclear weapons finds deep roots in religious ethic and principles, and it such should be highlighted, promoted, and definitely implemented by religions and faith-based organizations who had a huge importance in taking into consideration these issues. But also the question is what youth people can do, especially here. And as we heard, youth people are so important, especially nowadays when there is 1.8 billion young people living, and this is so huge and biggest community in the history of humankind. And we also don't need to forget that 90% of these youth people are living in the developing countries. So the question is what we as youth people can do, and there is a lot of things that can be done on the side of youth people. So when we are discussing about what can be done, the first thing is that youth people definitely should educate themselves, and they need to discuss about topics, and they need to be aware about threat of the nuclear weapons in the planet and in the world nowadays. When we are educating themselves, they are also educating their peers, and they are also educating their parents or other people in their community that maybe are not aware of the issues that is threatening us. Also, it is important for the young people to listen to the personal stories, because when we heard about how all these things are dangerous, it's so hard just to touch us when we are discussing that on the level of the science. But when you hear the personal stories, and I read some of the beautiful personal stories in the chat that participants were sharing of those survivors of the nuclear attacks, this is important, because then we put faces behind the stories. Then we can connect ourselves with stories of those people, and then we definitely we have different perception of what is and why it is so important to take something and to try to fight this threat that is coming from the nuclear weapons. Also, intergenerational partnership is so important, and that is the reason why forums and panel discussion like this are crucial into that, because we younger generation are learning from the older peers who are sharing their knowledge and experience. And why it is also important is because we are facing with something called transgenerational transmission of learning, but also transgenerational transmission of trauma. And in order to heal this and to take part in the process, it's so important to build on intergenerational partnership and to learn from each other experience. Then also we need to provide opportunities for young people to take part into these processes and to use, as we heard a lot of times today, all this new technology, because we are now living in a global village, so we need to use all this new technology to share our stories and our ideas. And it is also so important to promote the dialogue between people. Why to promote dialogue? Because when we all become one, when we all meet each other, it is so hard to have enemy on the other side when you know that human being. And when you find commonalities, then there won't be Cold War and that won't be enemies, but we will be all coming together and fighting for our world that is here today. Why? Because we are all sharing this world. If we destroy one part of the world, are we silly enough to think that we will be safe in our corner of the world? And it is the same happening with the global warming and all other issues. So we need to be aware that we are all in the same boat and that we are all equally responsible for staying here as long and as safe as possible. So that is important, meeting each other and sharing this idea. As Monica also quite nicely explained, there is a Corporation Circle Voice for a World Free of Nuclear Weapon, who is doing an amazing job on behalf of United Religion Initiative. So I won't take a lot of time discussing about that because all the information are already provided in the chat, and I'm sure that Kekeshan will also share a little bit experience from that, because there is a award given to her, and she was the first young person receiving award. And then this year there will be also another opportunity for some other incredible youth organizations to take award as well. But there is also other corporation circle like URI, Global Youth, CC, and 1 Billion Raising, who are doing amazing job in educating young people and providing this idea that we need to be aware about threat of nuclear weapon, and that we need to take some action as youth people and not just see what is happening around us, but that we are equally responsible. But because I'm here today in another role as well, representing European Interfaith Youth Network, I just want to highlight one initiative coming from the Religions for Peace. And European Interfaith Youth Network is youth network within Religions for Peace Europe. So in 2009, Religions for Peace launched the Arms Down campaign, which was the campaign with appeal led by religious youth calling to the nation to ban nuclear weapons and to reduce global military budget by 10%, and so that they can use this money to support the achievement of the United Nations Millennium Development Goals. And I must say that it was so successful campaign, and just in the first year of the campaign they managed to secure over 21 million endorsements from the religious youth. And this campaign is still going on in different forms. So we in Europe have campaign called Arms Down, Peace Out, which was very successful. And I want to invite all of you to join campaign and to pledge to your government to spend more money onto peace and more money onto education than on the war, and definitely then on the nuclear weapon. And it was already mentioned by Vanessa and other panelists earlier, but we are spending, and each government are spending so much money on the nuclear weapon that we should ask ourselves what can be done by that. And there is different numbers going on, but one that I found is that every minute there is around $140,000 spent on the nuclear weapon all over the world. So imagine if we are here talking, each of us, for 5-6 minutes, $700,000 US are spent currently while I'm speaking to you to the nuclear weapon. Just think 1 second, what can be done with this money? What can be done for youth people? Can we build schools? Can we educate young women? Can we promote more peaceful action? Can we invest in more economic growth? Can we invest in more spiritual places for people to enjoy themselves and to find their peace? So a lot of things can be done, and we all need to be aware that our money are spent on the nuclear weapon, and that we need to ask our government why they are spending it, and can they be spent on the much positive way. And so to conclude this story, as I mentioned, we are all interdependent, and each of us depends on well-being on the whole, and we need that to take care about that and to think about that. And the question is, can in the 21st century problems that we are facing right now can be solved by the 20th century weapons that are developed that are developed almost 75 years now. So we are all living in a globalized world. We are all meeting each other, and today it is so hard to have enemies when we are all so interconnected, and when by one click on the internet you can find person from any part of the world and build so strong connection with that person. So we are able to build trust among each other. And because, as I mentioned, nuclear weapons are almost 75 or 76-year old this year, don't we think that it is time for retirement? Don't we think that it is time to move to the better future for all of us? And can we all take our time to think what can be done and to move on to a better future? And can we start from you and me right now, right here today? So thank you for giving me floor.
Thank you so much, Leila. And I think that it was so interesting with your statistics that you pointed out, and your point that most of the world's people actually adhere to some form of religion. And religion is such a powerful force in connecting people all around the world to achieve common goals. So thank you so much for highlighting that, and all the work that you and Ms. Willard also do. So now we will move forward to the question and answer session. So the first question, let me just find it here, is a question that is directed to Monica, that asked, how would you guide or what would you recommend to religious youth today who would like to use their faith in fighting for nuclear disarmament?
Thank you for that question. And I just thank you, Leila, for your presentation. I would recommend, one, that people know where their religious documents or how their particular religion is looking at nuclear weapons, because you can't go back to any of the books and find anything about nuclear weapons. They're only 75 years old, but most religions have a stand. And if they don't have a very specific stance against nuclear weapons, this is the time to help them create one. But it's also the time to perhaps dust off some of the ones that were created in the 90s or the 80s or the 70s and really look at it and see how we can live into it. Because there just is no way that nuclear weapons can be supported with religious beliefs. I mean, it's indiscriminate. It isn't war. There are just so many reasons against it. And all of the amazing reasons that the treaty for the prohibition for nuclear weapons came into being certainly give groundwork, along with those well-documented things like the NPT or the CTBO. I mean, there are different treaties and negotiation things that line up with a better world for all, and the SDGs in particular. So learn something and go with it, and know that you are supported by most, any religious document I've ever seen that has taken a stand. I've always been opposed to nuclear weapons, even if you can figure, for instance, the Queen is obviously the head of the Anglican Church. So there is a disconnect there between where they're going for environmental protection. And I don't know if the Anglicans have anything as strong as the Pope has come out with, but not just this Pope, back to the 60s. So look for what's there and it really teach the people in the congregations that there is a stand against it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Willard. And now we have a question directed to Leila, which is, what reactions do you get when you promote nuclear disarmament issues among your youth interfaith networks?
Usually people are not used to discuss about this topic in interfaith circles, to be completely honest, because we are mainly focused on let's build peace, mutual understanding, spiritual values and stuff. But then when they start thinking about why it is so important, because as I mentioned, those are existential issues like climate change and others, then they start thinking, okay, this can happen to me. And as I said, how we manage to engage especially young people is by sharing personal stories, because you can have 1 or 2 hours long presentation about why nuclear weapon is so dangerous and why we all need to take that into consideration, and then people will go out and majority of them will forget about that. But when you bring the person who survived it or who has some personal connection to the story, then people start rethinking it, because then they try to be empathic, to put themselves in the shoes of that person and start thinking, what if somebody of my loved were a part of that accident, or what I can do, am I responsible for that? And then when you start to connecting people on more heart-to-heart level and more spiritual level, then people become more aware and then they start to taking action. So it is the long process, but we also strongly believe that even if we manage to change just one opinion and one human being at a time, it's already quite important and quite big step, because small actions, when they are built together, can make beautiful and big change in the end.
Most definitely. And I think we have one more question for this round, which is there a global perspective in order to help African countries in fighting against extreme violence or in working towards nuclear disarmament? And it's not directed to any panelist in specific, so.
The violent extremism issue is one that URI has been working with the Office of Genocide Prevention, and it is near and dear to the people on the ground, because whether it is extremist groups or just the conflict, militarization in general is supported by the sale of arms. And much as nuclear issues, Africa has voted to be a nuclear-free zone, but Nelson Mandela led the South Africans to give up nuclear weapons. It isn't impossible for a nuclear, for them to really look at a successful change in policy, and also to look at the new treaty to ban nuclear weapons and look at the process. None of the nuclear power states supported it, but this was a stance of the General Assembly saying, the few countries with nuclear weapons do not have the right to control the future of the planet. And so because we need to protect the planet from small scale horror for violent extremism or nuclear weapons, it's the same policy. We need to build trust, and we need to bring down tensions, and we need to build cooperation, and we need to provide water, food, basics. And if we work together with a focus, the change will come, but it might come a little slower than we want, but it will come.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Ms. Willard and Leila for your wonderful presentations. And I think a big thing we can all take away from your speeches is that, you know, putting a human face to the nuclear disarmament movement is so important, and that interfaith grassroots organizations are a very powerful tool in achieving that. So thank you so much for that. And before we move
Can I just add one other thing?
Yeah, of course.
And it fits with violent extremism as well. We need peace education. We need to train in nonviolence. We need to train in nonviolent communication and different ways at working on what might seem tangential issues can build the field for disarmament and nuclear abolition.
Most definitely. Thank you so much for the last remarks. And before we move on to the last but certainly not least panel, I've just put in the chat right now a link to Move the Nuclear Weapons Money, which Ellen has included in there before. And it's a wonderful campaign that makes memes to ask people where were they, what are the reasons for nuclear disarmament, or where would they rather invest that money, and anyone can be part of that campaign. So if you go and check out the website, you can look on and see how you can be part of that campaign and give your reasons as to why you would like to achieve nuclear disarmament. So now we are going on to the fourth mini panel, which is on disarmament and sustainability. And we have two wonderful speakers, Cynthia Lazaroff and Kekashan Baso. And the first speaker we will have is Cynthia from Hawaii. She's a very talented filmmaker and also the founder of US-Russia initiatives, as well as Nuclear Wake Up Call. So Ms. Lazarov, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Michaela. I am so honored to be with you and all of these extraordinary women this morning as we celebrate International Women's Day. And I just want to say deep bows to all of you at PNND for bringing us together, and to all of the speakers who have come before me. You have brought me so much hope and inspiration. And Monica, you said joy. And so my heart is just really filled with joy this morning. So thank you for all that you do, and to all of us gathered here together today. I'm just really grateful. So I'm going to share my screen and make this full screen. So for me, this work on, sorry about that. For me, this work on sustainability and disarmament has always been deeply, deeply personal. I came of age during the Cold War and grew up hearing that the Soviet Union was always going to be our enemy and that we were all most likely going to die in a nuclear war. So I wanted to go meet the Russian people. And as an exchange student in Leningrad in 1978, I made many dear friends. Some I came to know and love like family. There was just this huge disconnect between my love for my Russian friends, these two people in particular, and the thousands of nuclear weapons our countries had pointed at each other. I felt this even more as a teacher when I began teaching children in school in Moscow. We all wanted the same thing. We all wanted peace, and none of us wanted to die in a nuclear war. I came home wanting to do something, but I could see no women in those days at the official table of disarmament and Soviet-American relations. But I could see, as others have spoken before about this, women in the peace and disarmament movement, women like Randall Forsberg, the founder of the Nuclear Freeze movement, who didn't wait for an invitation. She built her own table, and there was a place for everyone at this table. As founders of the citizen diplomacy movement with Russia, we also couldn't wait. The risk of nuclear war was too great. So we created our own tables where everyone was welcome, and women came forward to lead along with men. I convened dialogues for Soviet American women, started many youth exchange programs, things like mountain climbs, where we demonstrated our ability to cooperate, survive, and thrive together. We were thrilled when finally the impossible became possible, the seemingly impossible became possible, when our two leaders sat down, met, and embarked on what would become the largest reductions in our nuclear arsenals in history. So when the Cold War ended, I thought I could stop worrying about nuclear war, and I went to work on coral reefs and climate change. This was after I heard marine biologist Abigail Alling speak, and I was shocked to learn that coral reefs are dying at an alarming rate, and that we could lose all the coral reefs of the planet by 2100 if immediate action isn't taken. I was called to this work because I love the sea, I love coral reefs, and I couldn't imagine leaving a world without reefs to my daughter, Mackenzie here, and all future generations. Abigail became my mentor, and she shared with me what she learned while living inside Biosphere 2 for 2 years, sealed inside under glass in what was then a miniature Earth, including a 1 million-gallon ocean. She taught me many, many, many things. That coral reefs are the canary in the coal mine for not only our oceans, but the health of our entire biosphere. That everything is connected in the web of life, that no act is insignificant, and that each and every act we take makes a difference in our biosphere. So if you can imagine this, if a crew member inside Biosphere 2 opened even a tiny tube of glue, they could see the immediate impact on their environment because there were 2,500 sensors constantly measuring the quality of the air, the water, and the soil. Imagine having that kind of feedback here in Biosphere 1, Earth. If every time you got in your car, if you drive a gasoline-fueled car, that you could see the 20 pounds of CO2 that you're emitting into the atmosphere with every gallon of gasoline you burn. That's the kind of impact that they could see inside Biosphere 2, and that would truly be game changing. I thought I would be working on sustainability for the rest of my life, but all of that changed for me in 2017 when I went to work on a film interviewing dozens of top experts on nuclear dangers, and pretty much everybody I spoke to awakened me to today's staggering nuclear danger. The two people who had the greatest impact on me during those interviews were former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev and our US former Secretary of Defense, William Perry. Secretary Perry said to me that we are at a greater risk of a nuclear catastrophe today than at any time in history. And then he said, most people are blissfully unaware of this danger and that we're sleepwalking into a nuclear catastrophe and we must wake up. Just weeks after sitting with President Gorbachev, former Soviet leader Gorbachev, I was one of over 1 million people across the Hawaiian Islands who all got this message on their cell phones. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii, seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. And as I was rushing to shelter in a cave, and I called my daughter Mackenzie to say goodbye and I love you for what I thought might be the last time, this is the experience that brought me back to working on disarmament and why I'm here today with all of you. This is why I started nuclearwakeupcall.earth, where we work in many ways to reduce the risk of nuclear war. And we ask ourselves what could be game-changing, truly game-changing. And the answer came to me when these 4 wonderful, wonderful young women all came to me within the space of about a week, having been touched by the story of the Hawaii false alarm, and asked me the question, none of them knowing each other, none of them ever having done anything with nuclear weapons before, will you mentor me? That's how Women Transforming Our Nuclear Legacy was born, where we work to foster a new generation of women leaders in disarmament and to catalyze a global movement of women and girls to eliminate nuclear weapons. We recognize, as many have spoken today, but so few women actually know this, that women and girls are disproportionately impacted by nuclear weapons due to ionizing radiation. That since the dawn of the nuclear age, women have been largely shut out of national security planning and nuclear policy making, and that excluding half of the human race has brought us to the brink of possible extinction. That today, in this pandemic, more than ever, it's an existential imperative that women come forward to lead, to claim their seat at the table and eliminate nuclear weapons. We had our inaugural session last September. Since then, we've had 4 sessions involving over 300 women from 42 countries, including 8 of the 9 nuclear armed states. And we have had brilliant, wonderful, and inspiring mentors like Keikishan, who I'm so honored to be in this panel with, who share really their insights, their wisdom, their experience, all different ages in the sessions from all over the world, but in all different ages of mentors, because we're all mentoring each other. They connect the dots. They talk about intersectionality, the inextricable link between disarmament and sustainability, that every dollar we spend on nuclear weapons is a dollar taken away from feeding a hungry child or addressing the existential threats of climate change or the pandemic that we're in, or any of a host of other things in the Sustainable Development Goals. Keikishan spoke about being called to this work out of love, compassion, and care for the earth and humanity. Sorry about that. And for me, that is what this work is really about and why it's so deeply personal for me. It's really about love. It's about love for life, love for our children, love for everything and everyone we know and love and cherish and hold dear on this earth. So in closing, I just want to honor Ambassador Elaine White Gomez, who negotiated the treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons at the UN. And she was our honored guest at our inaugural session. And she said that history is made by every single step that we take every day, that we're all in this together, and invited all of us as women to come forward and join her in making history to eliminate nuclear weapons. May it be so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lazarov. I think every time that I hear your story about the alert of the nuclear missile being potentially sent to Hawaii, I just get chills all the way up my arm. I can't imagine what you were going through in those moments. And I'm I'm sorry that you had to go through that, but I'm also glad that it brought you back into this field so you could truly draw the intersections of how nuclear disarmament truly affects all areas of social, environmental, and economic life. So thank you so much for your talk. And now we are going to hear from Kekeshan Baso, who's from the UAE and Canada. And she is the founder of the Green Hope Foundation, is a UN human rights champion, winner of the 2016 International Children's Peace Prize, as well as the winner of the first ever Voices Youth Gorbachev Schutz Legacy Award for Nuclear Disarmament. So Kekeshan, we welcome you to the floor.
Thank you so much. And let me just begin by saying Happy International Women's Day. I am so delighted to be sharing the stage with so many amazing women. And Cynthia, lovely to be on this mini panel with you. So I'd just like to begin by, well, talking about the pandemic and how the pandemic has reminded us once again how fallible our social systems are, about how myopic and insensitive our economic policies can be, where nations proudly broadcast the trillions that they spend on weapons of mass destruction. And when owning a firearm in the world's most powerful country is considered a greater fundamental right than having access to a ventilator when you're struggling to breathe. And at the receiving end of these policy foibles are almost inevitably the other half of humanity. That's us, women and girls. And while it makes good news to have us at the front lines of tackling the pandemic as healthcare workers, managing both work and home while being paid less, for millions of women and girls in the global south, no one really knows how many thousands have been sold off since the onset of COVID as child brides or into bonded labor so that the family can have one meal on the table. And there has never really been any meaningful discussion about our security because we have always been seen as weak, as if this somehow justifies our expendability. So whether it's in war or even otherwise, and despite the overwhelming lack of data on gender gaps, especially in developing countries, it's now an accepted fact that women and girls have suffered disproportionately more during the ongoing COVID crisis. And it began as a health issue that has now metamorphosized into an economic and social issue on a scale never witnessed in our lifetimes. Now, as someone who has been working at the forefront with desperately vulnerable communities in Bangladesh and Liberia, I continue to witness firsthand the abuse, violence, and exploitation that women and girls in these communities face, the scale of which has grown exponentially in the last 12 months. And their sufferings continue to vindicate my belief that peace needs to be looked at from a gender lens, because the lack of peace disproportionately affects us, women and girls. And as Cynthia mentioned, so does climate change, so does biodiversity loss and economic insecurity. And therefore, it all adds up to the fact that to create a gender equal world, we must address all issues that impede sustainability. The countries of the world spent $1.9 trillion on military in 2019, right before the pandemic hit. And my question is, how did that help at all? Did it solve the problem of lack of toilets in the villages of India and Bangladesh, where we at Green Hope Foundation has seen the tremendously negative impact that the lack of clean water and sanitation has on women and girls? No, this military spending, of course, did not help that. And so when we talk about gender, peace, and security, and nuclear disarmament and sustainability, this is what we need to address. how can we ensure the creation of just, resilient societies by leaving no one behind and reaching those who are the most affected, the women and girls, instead of providing a false sense of security through nuclear weapons? And whenever we talk about peace and peace builders in policy making, we only see men, and it's portrayed that way as well. But that's not true, because if we look into history, you'll find that women have traditionally played the role of peace builders, yet they're not at the forefront of peace building and nuclear disarmament movements. And peace is not a commodity that you can purchase and implement. Peace is not a far-fetched idea. Peace begins with ourselves. Nature-based solutions lead to peace. When you stop discrimination based on gender, race, caste, community, creed, you bring about peace. When you feed the hungry, you bring about peace. And peace is not just about ending wars, it's about avoiding that war in the first place. And peace means loving yourself and others. And for me, peace is about planting trees, about educating children. And it's about compassion and empathy. And women and girls throughout history have been known to embody these qualities. So we are naturally peace builders. And a truly peaceful, nuclear weapons-free world and a sustainable future can only be realized when people of all genders are treated equally. My thoughts keep going back to New Year's Day of 2018 at the Syrian refugee camp, where Green Hope Foundation was conducting workshops for Syrian war refugee children, their shell-shocked faces scarred by the ravages of a war whose strings were pulled by two nuclear superpowers who were fighting a proxy war far away from their own territories. The lack of peace hurts women and girls the most, and therefore it's imperative that we address all issues that can facilitate peace and nuclear disarmament through a gender perspective. And this is only possible when we have more of us at the decision-making table. Getting there will not happen on its own. We need to pit ourselves and win against centuries of bias. And that's the reason my advocacy is all about using education for sustainable development as the tool for our transformation that will aid us in removing the myths created on purpose about nuclear weapons and just weapons and armaments in general being essential for security, when in fact it's all about profiteering and about an agenda of power that is guised under the flag of nationalism. Nothing can be further from the truth, because this agenda has always lined the pockets of a few while the masses have suffered. And the sufferings caused by the pandemic has had one positive effect. It's created a global awareness about the importance and need for empathy. I believe that the time is now right for us to build on this newfound acceptance of multilateralism to establish the fact that being compassionate is being powerful. With our meager funding, if we at Green Hope Foundation are able to help people, so many people, why can't governments with their vaults of money do so much more as responsible denizens of our planet instead of wasting that on nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction? We don't need a nuclear arsenal to build a powerful nation. As we say at Green Hope Foundation, we want books, not nukes. Thank you very much, and back to you, Michaela.
Thank you much, Kegashan, for that very inspiring talk, and also for your notions that peace needs to be looked at through a gendered lens, as well as connecting that to other areas of sustainability. And I also found your definitions of peace so great to look at them that way, and really connect them to all issues such as ending poverty and saving the environment and creating a sustainable peace. So thank you so much for that. And now we are going to move on to the discussion part of this mini panel. And we have some questions lined up already. And the first one goes to both panelists, and it asks, The pandemic has exposed the fault lines and failure of our military approaches to security. Do you believe the pandemic has provided a novel momentum to come out from the pandemic with a much stronger hand to educate publics and inform national policies away from nuclear deterrence?
I can go first. That's a really good question. And yes, as I mentioned in my talk, the pandemic has given us the opportunity to rebuild better, and it has really opened our eyes to the gross inequalities that face our world today. So really, the time is now right for us to see how we can move away from nuclear weapons, and even for governments to realize where their resources must be allocated. Because if they want to help out their people and save their citizens, nuclear weapons are not going to do that. But investing in healthcare, that is going to help their citizens and save lives. So 2021 is being heralded as the year of the new normal. And I definitely believe that this is the time for us to create this new era in the movement of nuclear disarmament, where 76 years later, we can finally say we've done away with nuclear weapons globally.
Cynthia, I think you have some comments on that to build on.
Yes, well, I echo everything that Kehkashan just said. And also, I think it's really exposed around the world, and I will speak particularly in the United States, how unprepared we are to address things like the pandemic because we have not taken care of our people and our healthcare needs. It's exposed that in the country that spends more than any other country on nuclear weapons, we have had a shortage of basic things like masks, ventilators. ICANN did a great study where they've shown, the spending on weapons versus healthcare. And in the United States, we spend more on nuclear weapons. We have more nuclear warheads than hospitals. So when you hear something like that, I think it's exposed our vulnerability to where we need what our real security is. And so I think people can see that something is not, people who don't think about these issues can see that something's not right about this. Nuclear weapons can do nothing to address this kind of security challenge or climate change. And I'll just finally say that, I think it also exposed for many people that there was congressional legislation proposed last summer to cut our defense budget, which this year is 740 billion is the budget in the United States, to cut it by just 10% to care for people and to distribute that money for people's needs. And it was the first time that such a legislation had ever made the House floor during a pandemic. So that's good news. But it was bipartisanly supported to reject. So I think that also people are waking up and seeing that there's something wrong here. They're feeling that there's something not right, that we have lost now over 500,000 people in the United States due to COVID because we aren't taking care of human needs.
Most definitely. And wow, I didn't know of that, the fact that there are more nuclear warheads than hospitals in the US. That's quite a statement, I think. And now I think another question that's going to build on this question, how can the huge negative impact of Corona on women be transformed into a unique opportunity to make important steps towards gender equality? And again, this is open to both panelists. Oh, I think you're muted, Cynthia.
Well, I think again, it just echoes what I was just talking about, but I think even more so for women, it's exposed how women are so deeply impacted and disproportionately impacted in the United States and all over as caregivers, as people who often, do the job at home as well as the job at work. I mean, women have just been, in all the ways that Kehkashan so eloquently described, so impacted here. So I also feel that it is a wake-up call I think it's also women are really seeing, and we're seeing articles coming out about this in mainstream journals, that something has to change and that it's all connected. You know, that you have the nuclear weapons money movement. And I think people see that we need to shift the money and the spending and divest from nuclear weapons and invest in people, in our children, in women. So I think that's the teaching and the prayer that I have for what's going to come out of this.
Most definitely. And now we have time for one more question, which is also open to Yasmin as well as some other panelists, which is asking, what are the ways to increase diversity within nuclear disarmament, especially in relation to women of color? And I know that Cynthia also we've all talked about this before. So Yasmin, if you're still with us, then you can answer, or if anyone of the panelists want to raise their hand. I think Kekashan, you have your hand up.
Yes, I actually wanted to answer the previous question, and I think this question also fits in to what I wanted to say. First of all, while the pandemic has exposed how disproportionately women are impacted, it has also shown us the critical importance of women and girls in our economies and societies. So it's definitely, I agree with Cynthia, wake-up call to move ahead with gender equality as fast as possible. And in terms of increasing diversity, well, I'd say not just in nuclear disarmament, but in all fields, it's important that we move away from this Western way of thinking and solutions that are just imposed upon other nations that have their own unique challenges. And the only way we can get diversity is like taking those concerted steps to ensure that people from different backgrounds, the truly multidisciplinary dialogues are held and multidimensional actions are implemented on the ground. And again, the pandemic has opened up that avenue of multilateralism, where we are hearing more from people who have traditionally been left behind. So it ties into the first question that the pandemic is an opportunity to rebuild better. And that's exactly what Green Hope Foundation is doing as well.
I couldn't agree more with you, Kekashan. Do any of the panelists have any last remarks on this question?
I'd just like to add, I'm sorry I can't turn my video back on again, so apologies, but I'd like to add that I think it's also important that to recognize that oftentimes when we're asking people of color and marginalized people to participate, not everyone has the means to volunteer. A lot of our organizations rely on volunteer labor, and that is definitely not an option for a lot of people when you're looking at supporting your families, putting food on the table, or making sure that your electric bill is covered, right? So as much as we can fundraise, especially if you're in an organization that's in the position to do so, to offer a stipend, to look for university credit, because maybe that's one way that they can offset those kinds of things. That's a really important way to open the door to folks who might not have the opportunity to dive in on issues that otherwise would be a volunteer position.
Most definitely, that's a very important thing to bear in mind, Yasmin. And now if there's nobody else who would like to make any remarks on this topic, I don't see any hands up, then I will pass the floor over to Alan for some closing remarks on this really, really wonderful event.
Thank you very much, Michaela. Thank you very much to all the speakers, both the more experienced speakers and also the young enthusiasts. This has been a fantastic dialogue between generations, and we see, I think, through this dialogue how everyone has something to offer to this, and it's been wonderful, the range of contributions here. Thank you also to all the participants. I know this has actually gone on a little bit longer than what we expected, but the dialogue was so valuable that Michaela wisely allowed it to continue. And we know there are also many other events happening for International Women's Day, so we thank everybody who participated in this. We are very open to continuing our communication with everybody. So even if your question wasn't answered or you didn't have a chance to put it forward, Don't think that you're not included. We include everybody in these. Whether you come into Youth Fusion as a youth activist or as someone who's interested in dialoguing with youth, we have those options available in the Youth Fusion network. With Parliamentarians Network, Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, it's not only about the parliamentarians, because legislators can't take forward policies unless they have support and are pushed by civil society. So PNND is always working in cooperation. And the World Future Council, as you've seen, we've had some speakers like Kekashan, who's one of the leaders in the World Future Council, saying, is highlighting really important ideas and policies and initiatives and emerging from this pandemic with ways to build back better. We're not returning to prior pandemic times. We're using the learning, the understanding that's been developed and the connections that we'll be making during this time to be able to build a better world. So thank you, everyone. We will be following up with everyone who's participated with follow-up information about how you can be involved, make sure that you're connected with us. We thank everybody for joining, and we're really inspired to take forward this program. And although most of the speakers today have been women, that as you've heard from a number of the speakers, gender is not just about including more women. That's an important aspect of it and how important it is to have women at the table. But it's also about rethinking our framework of security, the political dynamics to ensure a more cooperative security approach, a more common security approach, one that is looking at the issues, the security needs of everybody. It's an inclusive approach rather than one that's dividing against us and so-called enemies. No, we're all on this planet together. It's one spaceship Earth. We have to work on building a security that is inclusive, cooperative, and is based on understanding, on respect, on communication, on dialogue, on conflict resolution, and on thinking about how we ensure sustainability for future generations. And that's what I think today has brought together to show many different ideas, and we're really excited about taking this forward and working with everybody who's been involved. So thank you again very much. And thank you to the young people who basically organized the program and facilitated the dialogue. Thank you, everybody. We look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Yes, thank you everyone once again. And now I think we'll close the event. And as Ellen said, we will stay in touch. So have a great evening or the rest of your day, and we'll see you soon, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Aloha.